We've got Bob's question here, and along those same lines. So we're good on Marvin Harrison playing regardless. There should be no thought given to holding him back. We've got this. It's the strongest position unit on either side of the ball.
It is interesting because they do have a deep room, but it's about what is an 80% Marvin Harrison versus a 100% Carnell Tate. Like, you're going to take Marvin Harrison in that. And he had 2 catches after he got hurt, and one of them was a key one on the final drive. But I thought, well, once he went down, I was like, I think I said it to Kevin. Now it's Carnell Tate's time. They've got to go with him in there because he's that other X. But they can move guys around. We saw Xavier Johnson in there as well, and you move him around. You put Emeka elsewhere. But I'm a little surprised we're not seeing more usage of the receivers. And at this point, it doesn't look like it's going to happen this year for Jaden Ballard, and then it's going to be up to him. Like, does he want to try it at Ohio State another year after this? The Heartline really likes his 3 top guys, and they've even had to kind of remind themselves to play Xavier Johnson more, I think, because we didn't really see him in week 1 much, and then they're like, okay, we're going to get him out there, we're going to put him in the backfield, we're going to motion him out. It's one of those things that also, like, when he comes in, it feels like they're just going to try to get him the ball and use him and then put him back on the bench and go back to what they're normally doing. But I would like to see more depth, more usage of the depth. But in the big games, you're going to go with the guys you trust most, because you don't want to be thrown to a freshman who, doesn't know where things are supposed to be or doesn't have that connection. Because after that Notre Dame game, talking to Kyle McCord and Ryan Day and Emeka Ibuka, that pass on whatever it was, 3rd and 19 or whatever, to the 1, that was something that they do, and they practiced that and they walked through that, and they knew when to stop, when to do, all of that, the intricacy there that you can't trust a freshman to pick up on all of that. And so that's why you put the guys out there that you trust. I mean, just look at JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer playing that entire game. In big games, that's just what happens.
Yeah, I was going to say, go ahead, Steve. I cut you off last time. Go ahead.
I just looked at the snap counts that our friend Donald Hope, Dan Hope over at 11 Warriors, we call him Donald Hope internally. It was Marvin Harrison, 66, Emeka Ibuka, 64, Julian Fleming, 57. Those 3 guys went the distance. And then Xavier Johnson, 6. Ballard and Tate only got on the field for special teams. So that will tell you we've got more receivers than IBM. We've got more blah, 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 blah. We can throw it all around the field. We can do this and we can do that. And we've recruited 8 5-star receivers every year for the last 10 years, but only 4 of them are going to play. So whatever.
There's a
diminishing return to that. There's a diminishing return to that, is my thought.
I agree with Tony there that, I'll give somebody a super chat if they make a GIF out of Steve flailing there. You want to sit there and get the younger guys in, get games over with. We've seen Ohio State play a lot of games that have not necessarily gotten to the point of saying, all right, everybody else goes in. I mean, and certainly not against Notre Dame, a game where, yes, Ohio State kept Notre Dame off the board for 2.5 quarters and then found itself trailing and everything else. I mean, I would love to see Tate and Ennis and Ballard and these guys get some more run. I mean, hell, nobody ever talks about the 2022 receiver class. I mean, there are a lot of guys that it would be great for them to have the opportunity. And we do talk a lot about playing for the future, but you have to play for the present first. And playing for the present, in a lot of ways, necessitates having Harrison Jr., Ibuka, those guys out there, Fleming. So there's kind of a balance there. And yes, you do want to get these guys in some higher leverage situations, but maybe not the highest of leverage situations.
I think we addressed Mika's question about Julian Fleming and Xavier Johnson. Mika, we will address recruiting in all one big batch a little bit later, so we can get to that. Folks, super chats are certainly welcome to help support the channel, keep this show going. So we appreciate those, and we will answer all the super chats. Otherwise, it's just kind of a random selection of comments and questions here. There was a statement made by David concerning, there it is, interior offensive line. We have not had the success running the ball in between the tackles.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and that's a concern. And I don't think they're getting as much out of Donovan Jackson as they thought they would, and I don't know how much of that is playing next to Carson Hinsman, a new starting center, and Josh Simmons, a new starting left tackle. I think both of those guys playing positions that they didn't play last year. So, that may be part of that. And there's always this feeling of when you have questions about who's on your left and who's on your right, or who's ever in front of you, you're also worried about their job as much as you are your job. And so I think maybe there's some of that going on. You saw that with the defense last year, basically as a whole, because there was just so much newness to it. So now everybody's focused on their own job and doing their 111th, and things are going better because they know they can trust everybody. I think the offensive line is still figuring out, how much they can trust each other, but also you got to play better. And Ryan Day said it on Tuesday. At some point, you've just got to move the guy across from you. You're big, strong. You've got to be big and strong. But they've not done well on the interior run. Ryan Day said they want to be above, north of 80% on short yardage in terms of 3rd and 4th and 1 and 2. Right now this season, they are 4 of 10 in those 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, 3rd and 2, 4th and 2 situations. So they need to get twice as good as they have been to be just shy of where Ryan Day wants them in those short yardage situations.
Eesh.
Which is totally. They only have to go. They only have to bat like 110% from the rest of the way out to get to 80% for the season.
Yeah.
Are we talking about slugging plus OPS or something, or if it's
dear.
batting average? We're in trouble there. But
This is when the stat walks lose me. I just want to know his home runs, his RBIs, and his batting average. None of the other crap matters.
What is
about WAR?
What is Jim Knowles' WAR?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was interesting right out of the gate. Dave Biddle, who works with Steve Hellwagon, brings right up to Ryan Day about, quarterback sneak. And, I've just seen an epidemic in watching football this year on all levels, that it seems that picking up 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 has been very difficult for a lot of teams. It was even brought up to Jim Knowles to a certain point, and of course he had to bring up his hometown Eagles, so I kind of quit listening at that point because I don't like the Eagles. But you've got to find ways to be able to do this. But 4 of 10 is just shockingly bad, and I mean, just not anything that I'm used to seeing. So I don't know if I have any answers to that one, other than you've got to move the bodies in front of you. You've got to get a better push from your line. You've got to have a better, you got to show that you're the better team. You're the team that's ranked number 4 in the nation. You got to go out there and play like it.
I will say they're 3 of 4 on 3rd and 3. So on running the ball on 3rd and 3. So good job.
I probably should have brought this up a minute ago when we were talking wide receivers, but it seemed to me, it just hit me that they force-fed Cade Stover right out of the gate against Notre Dame. It was like the first drive or two. Like they had scripted plays, Cade Stover, and then they kind of went into the flow of the game and got away from that.
I think some of that, I wonder if some of that is trying to free up Marvin Harrison and trying to say, hey, we're gonna take what you give us, but also ease up on Marv. And that's something they've talked about, where if people want to double him and bracket him, then you've got to go away from him and find the open area. But some of those throws that McCord was taking to Stover were not open areas, and he was really trying to thread the needle on some of these that skinny posts that weren't open and that Stover couldn't get around the defender too. So there's a lot for Kyle McCord to learn from that one. But I do think you're going to continue to see like an emphasis on trying to make teams pay for doubling Marv so that they come off of doubling Marv. But I also think you could do more when he is singled to go get him, because I can tell you, Steve and Kevin and I will sit up there, and every time Marv is singled covered, we're like, hey, just one guy on Marv right now, and then they'll go away from it.
Mark Nave is an interior offensive lineman out of Toledo, top 20 player in the state of Ohio, top 40 interior offensive lineman, depending on your service. He is decommitted from Ohio State. Kevin, take us through the latest on the recruiting front.
Yeah, with Mark Nave, I know that Justin Fry was up in Toledo, and I'm sure that they had to have kind of some conversations about where things were going. And, for whatever reason, people may like to throw words out like processed or whatever, but I think that it was probably more of a case of Mark Nave realizing that, maybe the dream wasn't going to completely come together, and he decided to open up his recruitment. And it sounds like Ohio State has, exited the picture there. I mean, they still have 3 linemen in the class with the Armstrong twins and with Ian Moore out of Indiana. And you certainly wish, Mark Nave, who, was a fixture at Ohio State's camps and, was certainly working on improving his craft. But I think there's more pressure on Ohio State offensive line recruiting than there's ever been, just with the sheer amount of bad scouting that they've done and bodies that they brought in that haven't necessarily been able to get to the mix. I mean, we sat here and had this whole conversation about Ohio State's interior line not necessarily performing well in the run game. If you sit there and you think that something is not going to work, I mean, it's show business, not show friends, and you've got to make those decisions. I mean, Mark is a great kid. I've had an opportunity to talk to him on several occasions, and I wish him nothing but the best, but it just didn't work out.
Yeah, I am interested to see if there's anything more comes out of this, but I kind of agree that it was a case of the two parties kind of realizing that it might not be the best fit, and that's just the way that it works out sometimes. They now have the benefit of 7 weeks of high school film of watching Mark, in his senior year to go through that. I'm sure they didn't make this, I say decision. It didn't come to this point without them examining every ounce or every inch of that tape to know whether or not he's somebody who could potentially help them in 2 years or not. I think it may speak to the fact that, and again, you fall in love with the guys who are playing, and, you hope it works out for Josh Simmons and Fryer at the tackle positions. You lose both your guards after this season if you believe that Donovan Jackson truly is going to go to the NFL after this season. And to me, it's Enoch Vamahi and maybe Tegra Toshbola who has been repping at guard this season, because by all rights, it should be Simmons and Fryer again at tackle next year. But I don't think you can rule out the possibility that if they get to the end of this season and decide we got to do better than this next year, that they go into the transfer portal and go get a legitimate Power 5, all conference tackle to fill one of those 2 spots next year, and or an all conference guard to fill one of those 2 spots next year. I don't think you could rule that out. And by not taking Nave, they've now created an extra scholarship spot that, potentially will go to a portal guy. They don't seem to be in on a national top 100 offensive lineman, top 100 overall prospect guy.
They're in not. Yeah, they're probably
so few of them.
Yeah,
that it's just not feasible that they're. I mean, maybe they probably got a 20% chance that they'll sign one. In addition to the 3 guys they're going to get. I like the Armstrong brothers. I think you look at them standing there, you say, oh my, those guys look the part. They're devoted to Ohio State. They're Ohio guys. They played a great program at St. Ed's. And so you say, yes, by their 3rd year, one of them should be starting. I don't know which one, but that's my firm belief. And I think Ian Moore is a good enough player that maybe by his second year, he might be in a position where he'd be, starting. So those guys I have no issue with. Even, the Armstrongs aren't necessarily national top 125 players either. So I've talked a lot about things I really don't know a whole lot about right there, but I'm just trying to give you what it seems to be is the case here, and the overarching thought on this offensive line that, Simmons and Fryer are the placeholders right now at tackle, but at the end of the year, Ryan Day, Brian Hartline, and Justin Fryer, I got to get everybody's name right, will sit down in a room, look each other in the eye, and say, can we do better at these positions if we go out there and find somebody? And they may very well decide that they can. So maybe that's part and parcel of letting Nave walk.
And I think also they've got a bunch of guards and right tackles over the last few years, and they need more left tackles. And Nave, I know he was also working at center, but he was going to be an interior guy. I think there's some question: is Ian Moore a guard or a tackle? I think Deontay Armstrong is the only sure tackle in this class right now. So do you need 4 interior guys? I don't think so, because that's, you're almost taking 4 interior guys every year, because you're taking a bunch of guys that can play either right tackle, can either play tackle or guard. And when you're taking guys who can play tackle or guard, you're taking guards and right tackles, basically, because left tackle is an entirely different animal in terms of, okay, we know that guy can play left tackle or right tackle. But when you're, Josh Fryer, who is a guard but is playing right tackle, was almost playing left tackle. Like, if he goes to the NFL, he's almost certainly going to be on the interior. And when you look at all of these guys, if they're playing tackle for you but can't play tackle in the NFL, that's not really the standard that you want to have at Ohio State. Sometimes it can work out, like with Jack Mewhort, who is a fantastic tackle and goes and plays on the interior in the NFL for a little while. And, other guys have done similar. But ideally, your tackles at Ohio State also play tackle in the NFL, just like your running backs play running back at Ohio State, and then they do it in the NFL. Like, you should be able to have those kinds of guys. And right now, I don't know where they're going to get them. Simmons is going to be around for a while. Fryer is obviously coming back, but I also don't think that's a situation where Ohio State's going to look at those guys and be like, we're set there. And I do think they need to be more aggressive on the offensive line in the transfer portal, because everybody else is. And if you can find somebody that solidifies your offensive line, like look at Jonah Jackson back in 2019. Like, that dude was descended from heaven, basically, or Rutgers. Sometimes I get too confused, but he really helped gel that offensive line for them, and he made them better. And if they can go find another guy like that who is also a left tackle, because you can move Simmons back to right tackle, you can move Josh Fryer to guard, like you can find your 5 best guys, but you have to go looking. And I don't think they were as aggressive looking last year until they went through spring ball and realized we're in trouble. And so they need to figure out how much trouble they're in, come December and January.
Yeah, I mean, you throw Luke Montgomery into the mix at tackle. I mean, obviously they talked him up a lot of being somebody who will play. I mean, and he's seen a smattering. Don't need to see him at fullback, but we've seen a smattering of him in the Bison package, or inside joke to some of our shows, the Mastodon package, or whatever you may do there. But I absolutely do think that they're going to have to hit the portal for offensive line, just even if it's out of a depth scenario. And you're not going to be able to go out and go get a top guy who's looking to move up and say, well, we're going to roll you in there to the depth. You may or may not play. I mean, you also don't want to make a lot of promises, but when you go out and, like the guy that went to Oregon, Cornelius, he knew he was going to go in there and step right into that role. And I think Ohio State has to be ready and have its ducks in a row the day that the portal opens, which is now only going to be for 45 days, 30 after the season, 15 in the spring. Have its ducks in a row and be ready with that. And I know Ohio State certainly has a portal division of its recruiting department under Mark Pantoni's leadership. And, it's just going to be a matter of being able to sway those guys there, and three letters come to mind with that, and that's NIL.
Yeah, not only your ducks in a row, but about $750,000 for a 1-year tackle.
Is that the going rate right now?
I mean, if it's a premium, if it's just a 1-year guy, right? Like, if it's a 3-year guy, maybe you can do it for 1.5 over 3 years, but you're going to get 1 year out of them. That takes the bidding up. Teams are more desperate for that 1-year quick fix. And, I wouldn't put it past $750K. Or I would.
I wish I had eligibility and knees and talent. I mean, because I could use 1.5 over 3 years. That would be nice.
Yeah, that would do okay. Tony, I guess I'm asking you to launch another exhaustive database, because during this discussion, I'm thinking, wonder if anyone's put anything together to determine what positions need the most development, meaning which positions where the highest recruits have correlated to the best players versus the other ones where there's a bit of a gap. Obviously, you still want the most talented guys, but offensive line comes to mind as more development position. Offensive line coach maybe being a little bit more important and impactful than some of the other positions. Just, I've got nothing to go on except for conversation and observation to say that.
I think the top guys kind of can play pretty early. We've seen Georgia and Alabama start guys. Paris Johnson played as a freshman but started as a sophomore. But I think the offensive line is the number one long-term development position. Justin Fry talked about how for offensive linemen, he told his team, basically your first year, you're learning how to play college football. Your second year, you're learning how to play your position. Then your third year is the year you're playing your position. And, that's your redshirt sophomore year, basically. And then you're as a fourth year, like that's how I've always envisioned it. Like if you're not in the too deep by your third year, there are some concerns there. And if you're not starting by your fourth year as a redshirt junior, it's probably not going to happen for you. But then also there is something to be said for these fifth-year seniors that just wait around and then can fill in when needed. But you can't necessarily just wait around for a fifth-year guy to be a starter for you, especially when that has kind of brought the entire talent of the room down because that guy's not playing. So I think offensive line, and a long-winded answer, is the number one position that takes the longest, and you have to be more patient with that offensive line than any other. I know Day will maybe tell you tight end as well, because you have to be able to play tackle and wide receiver, and you line up in different spots. You have to be really smart. So that's another one that I know that they are very developmental on, especially when so many of those guys like Joe Royer never played tight end and G. Scott never played tight end. Like they came in as pass catchers. Cade Stover obviously was a linebacker, running back, that sort of stuff. And so there's a lot of development that goes into that position for sure too.